Welcome back. So now we've got our notes written down, we're actually going to have to write a second set of notes, because what I did back when I was first learning is not only would I write down the list of things to do, but what I would also do is draw kind of like a little bit of an indicator as to where the switch is, where the panel is, and I'd, say for instance it was a set of 4 switches, I'd highlight the middle one, something like that, and give me a general direction as to where it is, whether it's the right lower panel, in front of me, up on the top right, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I haven't got my old A10 notes. I did have a little drawing of where things were in my startup list. So that's the next step. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a little bit of an indicator where the buttons are, because we're going to need it, because it's all well and good to write down switch on main power, but where is the main power button? So that's the next step. What we'll do, say for instance if we take let's see, data cart, right, and we go Control F for find, we go data. I know where it is because it's in the back left behind us, but data cartridge, okay, so we'll just find there's 3 out of 31, just go for a bit of a search. So now you've got a picture of where it is and where it goes, see? And then you can draw yourself a little picture. So what I would do is I'd write next to it, to my left behind me, that kind of thing, even though that's easy to remember, and draw myself a little picture as to what panel it's on. Is it next to my right knee? What am I looking for? That kind of thing. And then that way it's easier to find it when you're going through the startup procedure for the first time. So go ahead and do that, and we're going to skip ahead in this one, unlike last time where I gave you a bit of time to do what you're doing. I'm going to skip ahead and we'll go through the startup in this episode. Okay, so hopefully you've got your notes with you, you've got your shorthand and your directions on where to go and what to do, where you'll find them in the cockpit. Now it does take a while, a bit of practice to do it, but you end up getting a shorthand. Now to be honest, I've been back and forth doing this a couple of times. I haven't done the full startup yet, but if you get lost, just tick a little thing next to where it is on the list where you're lost, and then go have a bit of a search. And see, maybe you're looking in the wrong location, maybe anything like that. Maybe you need to improve your notes a little bit so you can find it. Now, going through the full startup I think is a good idea, because it'll give you some rabbit holes to go down. Say for instance the Vision, we've got countermeasure pods, which is, we're going to save that for another day, and also TILS, which is a tactical instrument landing system, basically a tactical ILS. So if you go through the full startup list, you can actually see things to little rabbit holes to go down that'll give you a better understanding of the aircraft. There's a lot of really good tutorials on how to do startups online, and this isn't really a startup tutorial. This is more of a how to teach yourself. I mean, the startup tutorials are obviously very handy, and they'll most of the time show you shortcuts and how to get through it really quickly in order to start up your aircraft quick. But this I find is the best to learn and get your foot in the door if you want to be really good at what you do. Now, because this aircraft is in a different language, there's a couple of things I've discovered. So TILL, T-I-L-L, is shorthand for either on or operate, and FRAN is for off, or not operate in shorthand. FEL means failure, that's the shorthand, and RHM is the radar altimeter. So anything referencing RHM is going to be the radar altimeter in this aircraft. So we're going to go through the full list although the full list is assuming you have ground power on, but we don't have ground power. So we're going to have to skip over a few of these, and some of these aren't high priority as well, because we can always go back and find out where the landing lights are or the emergency lights. So we're just going to skip over them, or the ones that I couldn't find due to their position being cut off in the manual, as per the previous slide. So what we're going to do, a couple of things that I've had to set as well, and like I said, we set them as we need them. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to adjust controls. Now I had to set idle, and I set it to the wrong one first. Sometimes you'll have this problem. So the high pressure fuel valve off to idle is the one you want to set for the indent on your throttle. So with aircraft, the modern aircraft, there's a little indent that you have to jump over to get to idle. So there's off, then idle, and then with a lot of aircraft you have different ranges as well, so you can go into afterburner 1, afterburner 2, afterburner 3, so on and so forth. But if you set your idle indent to this one here, high pressure fuel valve throttle to idle, it'll work the wrong way around. So actually pulling your throttle backwards will turn it on, which is not what you want. You want the other way around. I've also had to set zoom because my track IR is not behaving today. So I've gone into axis assign zoom view, and I've set that to a slider on my HOTAS throttle, which does get a little bit jittery, as you can see, but you know it works. So what we're going to do, we'll run through the full setup and skip a few things. So here in my shorthand, I've got, say, if we're checking something, and we need to check like 3 things in a row, I've got the ejection seat, the trigger safety, and the park brake all on the same line, and just, you know, check whatever, blah blah blah. But you'll figure out a good way to do it. What we're going to do, we're going to completely ignore what that says, and we're just going to arm the ejection seat first, just so it's done, because we're not going through the startup procedure fully at this stage. Now we're just going to double check and make sure that that's on, which we know, but we're just going to have a look at it because, you know, the manual says it, and we just want to make sure. Now, something you might not be aware of if you're new is park brakes work a bit funny in aircraft. So if I push that in, the park brake's off, but now I can't set it again. So what I need to do is put my toe brakes on and pull it out and release the toe brakes, or in some aircraft you have to pull it out, hold it out, put the toe brakes on, and then release it. So that can catch people out sometimes because it's a bit non-intuitive. So what we're going to do now is data cart. So we know the data cart goes in here, back into the left. Main power. So the main power goes on, which is the Hoverstrom. Then the low pressure fuel valve, which is LT Cran, goes on. So we acknowledge the master caution, and optional cockpit lights. I don't know where they are, so we're going to ignore them. Master mode in BER, so that's your master mode. We'll leave that in BER. Check gear. Whenever they say check gear, just check it regardless. Gear is checked, it's down. The auto throttle, which is the AFK, which is near the landing gear. This, which is off. That's very good. Auto throttle off. Idle. So we'll go over the indent. Hopefully it works. Yep, it works. Landing light off. We're not going to worry about the landing lights or the emergency lights, which is nod bell, because I don't know if they're working, if the power's on or off, but not important at the moment. We just want to get our first startup done. So check warning light panel, which is the contra lamp d'arbre, forward near the center console on the left. Contra lamp d'arbre. Looks like all the lights are working. So this is basically a signal lamp test. Just make sure the lights are all functioning. Very good. We're not going to worry about checking roll trim, because that there I've ticked, and I definitely know we can't do that until the power is on. So the next step is generator on. Generator, that's in English, so I know what that is, so that's on. Autopilot and yaw trim set to 0. We don't need to worry about them because I don't think they work without the power, but I still can't find where Renelingning is. I know where SID trim is, but I don't know where the indicator of where the trim is, so that's something that we'll need to have a look at, because generally when it comes to trim you'll have an indicator in some aircraft that will tell you whether you're nose high or nose low, like this down here. So that tells you where your nose is in relation to the trim, which is fine. We'll leave that for now. FR24 radio, normal and guard. We're not going to worry about that because we're not too concerned with the radios yet. Next page. Mic bank. That's the flight recorder as desired. We don't desire it, so no thank you. Radar panel, normal settings. What are the normal settings? So that's a rabbit hole to go down, so you can tick that and say, well, let's have a look at the radar settings. Radar altitude, land or sea, which is down here. Now, because that says land, I'm assuming SJO is sea. I guess we'll have a, we'll just take a wild guess at that. Thrust reverser off, which is this. You probably want to set that to something that's a little bit easier to reach within your throttles or joystick or whatever you've got. ADI, so it just says ADI, I guess we make sure it's either aligned or aligned. I can't seem to uncage it. I don't know what that's doing. That's not doing anything, so let's not worry about it. The other radio, the FR22 radio, which is here, we're not going to worry about. HUD reflector glass, where, still can't figure out where that is. We want to put it to landing settings. HUD slave, slav SI to off, which means we'll have to put it to F or Fran, whichever one it says, and it's left under the chrono, which the chrono's on the right, but it's left under the chrono. So we want to put that to F for Fran, and it's a chrono, not a clock, otherwise you'll get told off if you call it otherwise. Altitude source select, Hodged CI SI. So that's either baro or radar, so I'm assuming we're going to see RHM at some point. Yep, so that's set to radar. Radar altimeter. Now we've got check. Backup ADI, altitude and course, which ADI, altitude and course. I'm assuming they mean check the backup illumination, because we can't uncage them or anything while the power's off, so we won't worry about that. We'll have to come back to that one. Check engine pressure ratio is 1.0, which it is over here. KB countermeasures pod as desired. That's a video for another day. External lights, won't worry about that. IFF on, which is on the right side on the wall. Still can't find it, but by default it is switched on. Sorry if I'm making you throw up because this screen's going everywhere. I'm trying to read my notes at the same time. Course correct, I know where that is, but we're not going to screw with it. So the course correction here, that has to do with magnetic deviation and that kind of stuff within the navigation instruments. We're not going to worry about it. Hey, Mr. C-130. Defrost canopy. Don't know where the Varmluft Spolning from Truder is. Still unsure. We'll have to come back to that later, but defrost canopy could become important at some point depending on the weather and if we're going to ice up. Remember that we do get icing from my previous videos. Weather conditions do permit that from happening, do permit that to happen in DCS. So tills, we want to make sure that's at A, so this is the tills here. That little arrow there is saying that we are set to A, so that's fine. That's the tactical instrument landing system I was talking about before. Radar altimeter on. RHM till, I'm assuming that's the radar altimeter and that is set on. Weapon select as desired, we don't need to worry about that. Circuit breakers in the right circuit breaker panel. You'd run your hands over these as soon as you click them. In DCS they pop out, so it looks like they're already in. Data input load Let's not worry about that because we need power on to do that. Oxygen, check pressure, and till. So that says Fran, that means it's off. Till means it's on. So that's we won't worry about checking the oxygen pressure to begin with. Okay, system check. Now, let's just do this anyway without the power on. I'm not sure whether we need the power on or not. So this is control. It does about 7 tests. Looks okay to me. How would I know? Maybe we'll start it up before and then try the control afterwards. So what we'll do, start switch, 2 seconds in automatically. So the start switch will stay in for as long as it needs to automatically, and here it is over here. Now I can't hear anything at this stage, so what I'll do, maybe we'll just go. It sounds like it's starting. Yeah, the systems are definitely doing something here. Alright, so that's starting. Very good. Okay, now, do we need to give it time? Yep, okay, so we need to make sure that the SPAK light is on. Alright, so that could mean, I mean, we've got a few warnings here. They look like stall warnings though, which, what good's that going to do me when we're on the ground? No stall. I don't know whether that has to do with the nose, but we've got V stall and H stall. And IUV O stall. I don't know what any of them mean. So that may be a rabbit hole to go down later. Alright, so what we're going to do now, from the notes that I've got, which not all of these are in this startup now, we're kind of crossing borders and reading a little bit extra. So we need to program the computer. I mean, it's all in the same startup area. So the references to the data cart will actually be just under the startup, so you're not doing anything too crazy. So we'll go ref Lola, which has to do with latitude and longitude and references. Turn it to input. Now what we need to do is remember that if we get 6 zeros, it's a success. If not, it failed. So we need to put in 9099, and we need to hit ls-sku, which is down here, and we're going to watch this and wait for all those 3 zeros, 6 zeros to pop up. Okay, so that was a success. Now, going to active position means that we're going to be getting references back of what it thinks our position is and how much it thinks we've deviated from course or whatever. That's a story for another day, so we'll go into that later. And now we need to put the master mode into nav and see if that makes any difference. Okay, so far that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. I think we've covered that off. So now what we need to do after we've done the startup, oh look, we've got the HUD and everything. That's great. So what we're going to do after we've done the startup, we're going to go through the takeoff checklist. We're going to save that one for another video on a later day. Now, doing the takeoff checklist should also give us a reference whether we've done the correct thing with the startup. So if there's any mention of a system that's not working or whatever, then we know that we need to go back and we'll need to double check stuff like the autopilot yaw, the yaw trim, all that kind of stuff, and just make sure that we've covered everything. And actually, let's put the canopy down. We need to do that. So the canopy is here. we forgot to do that. But you can put it down at any point. So after you get proficient at doing this, you'll come up with your own startup. Obviously things happen in a certain order that have to happen in the machine, otherwise it won't work. Whereas with me, and the radar needs to be an AO, which I can't click that. I'll have to set up the buttons, but it does look like it's in AO at the moment. Say for instance, depending on what it is I'm doing, I actually change up my startup. So if I'm starting the A10, sometimes I'll actually have the canopy open until I get onto the runway, and then I've reminded myself that if I've left the canopy open, to check the pitot heat and make sure the pitot heat is on. If the canopy's closed, then I have to remember to check the pitot heat anyway, but usually I leave the canopy open to remind me to check the pitot heat. Or you can close the canopy before you taxi, before you start up the engine. Certain things have to be done in a certain order, but you'll come up with your own method of doing things. And next step is to go through the takeoff procedure, and we'll set buttons accordingly, and we'll make sure whether our startup is actually functioning correctly, and we'll come back and make any corrections if needed. Now obviously it's going to be different for you if you're doing a different module. Maybe you've perfected it, maybe I need to come back, but you won't need to come back. But we'll just have a quick look, and we'll go through the process of what it means to learn a module in DCS. So thanks for watching. I hope this has been a bit of a help, and hopefully this demonstrates why reading up yourself is actually really good. And I'm certainly not bagging all those awesome YouTubers out there who do startup tutorials. They're a great source, a great resource, and a great help to the community, but sometimes they are giving you something focused on a quick startup, which gives you everything you need, and it's perfect, it's great, but it misses out on some of those little things here and there. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying I'm saying it is good. Like, once you get proficient, those guys have actually cut it down to something very easily done, where you can just get out there. But if you want to learn a bit more about how the aircraft starts, and a bit more of the systems that are in there, this is the best way to do it, and it kind of gets you started on that rolling ball of educating yourself and studying a bit, which I find is pretty cool. So anyway, thanks for watching. I've rambled for way too long, and I will see you in the next one.